All right, man. So we got an absolutely huge story here coming from Kamala Harris. She's been employing some pretty interesting strategies, and we have a really interesting one here. So I actually also introduced what I called the humility hypothesis. And so that's the idea that Kamala Harris will be able to win the election or is guaranteed to win the election, not because she's going to blow out in any states or anything like that, but simply because she's putting in all the effort required. She's avoiding making this just an identity politics thing about race or gender. She says that she's running for everybody. She's not like tapping into that super hard. She is reaching out to a bunch of House members to be her surrogates. She's doing all this different stuff, going out to all these voters. At rallies, she always puts the voters front and center instead of herself. Unlike Hillary or Biden, who are all about them. Biden's still running with his old camp back from 2020, basically. And Hillary Clinton, of course, all about herself, super all about herself. So we have just yet another example of this with another Harris strategy. So this article reads, Harris hires rural vote director in bid to cut into Trump's battleground margins. Rural voters in just a handful of states could swing the outcome of November elections. Vice President Kamala Harris is bringing on a new campaign hire as part of her team's push to clinch must-win states this fall by keeping former President Donald Trump from running up the score in rural counties. Harris is tapping Matt Hildreth of the Progressive Rural Organizing Group as her rural engagement director, according to four people familiar with the plans who were granted anonymity to discuss the matter. Democrats have been hemorrhaging support in rural America for years, but making even a small dent in Trump's steep rural margins could determine the outcome in battleground states that may be decided by razor-thin margins. So this is also a big deal here. I also will talk about this a lot in videos where I'll be like, man, like, can she improve with this X group, maybe like older white men, for example? Can she improve? Can she gain some? And people are like, oh, no, there's no way. She's not winning that group. And I'm like, dude, I wasn't saying that she has to win. But, for example, if amongst the older group you're able to make inroads by 2 points, 3 points, or among white voters or male voters in general, if you make an inroad of like 2 to 3 points, if you make it with like old white males, 2 to 3 points, or uneducated voters, you don't have to win those groups. That's not the point. What you need to do is the election is so close, all you have to do is shift it 1 to 3 points. Basically, that's it, and you're able to shift it out. So it says, hiring Hildreth, whose grassroots organization is already knocking doors for Harris and Democratic candidates across the country this fall, signals the campaign is looking to seriously expand a resource-intensive ground game to reach rural voters who could swing the election. The Harris-Walz team doesn't expect the ticket to flip many rural counties, but some of Harris's top advisors have argued that simply losing by slightly fewer percentage points in these areas could help her carry her and down-ballot Democrats to victory. In recent memos, the campaign has argued, quote, the key to decreasing margins in rural areas is to show up and compete everywhere, which is exactly what we're doing across the country. So it looks like we also saw this with the Georgia situation. We went pretty in-depth on what was going on with Georgia and the bus tour they were doing in Georgia. I don't know if they went like in the direct south of Georgia or not, or if they went through the kind of rural areas that were sort of more northwest, that were in the southwest, but northwest of like the exact south. Because that area actually went redder, and they were using like Warnock's main strategist. So they might have went in those areas that were there that actually went bluer. But the idea is that you're able to boost your rural numbers just by having like a ground game in those areas. If you're able to make contacts, if you're able to reach out, if they just hear from you. I'd be interested to see if there's like regression data or any kind of like specific correlation that shows that, hey, this like contacts and on the ground stuff has like a direct correlation with rural voters. That and maybe it's specific to rural voters. I'm not sure if those numbers exist. Maybe I'll look into that kind of stuff. It says a Harris campaign spokesperson confirmed the hire. The campaign is now looking to ramp up an aggressive ground game from Wisconsin to Arizona to Georgia and other battleground states to peel away even a few percentage points from Trump's rural margins. The move comes weeks after Democrats in battleground districts feared President Joe Biden's debate fallout would cost them another wave of votes, including some of the party's few remaining rural House seats. So, again, in Wisconsin, AZ, Georgia, those kinds of areas, if you can make some ground in those kind of rural areas, that can save you the election. You can win the election just based off of those, sort of few small margins that you would get in those states. So it's absolutely huge in states like Arizona and Georgia. Arizona decided by 0.3% in 2020. Georgia decided by 0.2%. Wisconsin only 0.7%. A lot of people sleep on the margin of Wisconsin. Wisconsin's super close. And then I believe in 2000 and 2004, it went blue by like 0.2 or something like that, or even less. So unfathomable, right? It says Harris's deputy campaign manager Quentin Fulks helped Senator Raphael Warnock cut down GOP rural margins in his 2022 Georgia Senate win. He was a key part of organizing Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's recent bus tour in rural Georgia, a rare step for a national Democratic ticket, as local Democrats argue the party has increasingly overlooked rural organization at its peril. Local organizers also note that the party has a solid opportunity to gain support in some rural communities, especially in pockets of Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona with younger voters and voters of color. The Biden-Harris administration and Democrats have poured billions in federal investments into rural communities, with Biden just this week touting new funding in a largely rural swing district in southwest Wisconsin. It says that they're concerned about how, switching to Biden might end up losing some of those kinds of white, like rural voters and those kinds of voters. Hopefully, there's not going to be like a lot of sexism involved with that as well, where it's like a lot of the voters who, are going to be people who are down to vote for Biden but not down to vote for Kamala Harris. But they have like a secret weapon that they're pulling out, or I guess it's not super secret, but it says here, Harris's team is hoping that's where Walz can boost a ticket. Beleaguered local Democrats from Walz's own former red Minnesota district, who represented in Congress for 12 years to Pennsylvania and other swing states, are being completely re-energized by Walz's spots on the ticket. Those Democrats understand Walz still won't convert hardcore rural Republicans, given he didn't overperform with rural voters in his own races for governor. But they argue he will help the party drive turnout in small towns and medium-sized cities in rural adjacent regions in order to secure wins up and down the ballot. Another thing also, when we were looking at the Georgia thing also, was that a lot of the rural areas had like a large proportion, like I think like 40% or something of black voters. So it's not necessarily the case that all the rural voters, like all these like white, like poor farmers and everything, like a lot of those voters were also minority groups and stuff that would vote more Democratic. So a lot of this doesn't have to be going in and converting those rural people, those sort of people who are not going to vote for you, but it would just be pulling out those voters to come out for you who are not getting contacted, and so they're not turning out to vote, like those black voters or young voters or Hispanic voters, pulling those people to come out. Another reason why I think like abolishing the Electoral College would be good, because if everyone's vote means the same, and marginal utility I think of ad runs would actually be higher in those kinds of rural, less populated areas, you'd have a higher marginal utility. Because ad space is actually supply is constrained, but so aggregate price levels drive really high. But a black person's vote in a rural area would count just as much as a white person's in California or whatever. So everyone would have an interest in going everywhere. It wouldn't just be in the sort of high population centers. But this would be a huge deal in terms of being able to win the election. And then I would also just say that it kind of comes down to a situation of also the grandeur picture of what's going on, because we don't want to lose the forest for the trees. And so, again, what I see from Kamala Harris is a really aggressive campaign that's leaving no stone unturned. She's reached out to House members on day one. She's constantly basically begging people at her rallies, please, like, you're the one who won this, not me. I'm not going to win this. You won the previous election, not us. We didn't win. You won. We need you to do it again. She's reaching out to House members, etc., saying, hey, will you be my surrogate? Doing all this kind of stuff. And so doing a bus tour through rural Georgia with all of this hard work that she's putting in. She keeps saying she's an underdog, always touting the numbers that says that she's losing in order to try to stimulate people to win. Unlike Hillary Clinton, who really is kind of full of herself, always about herself, convinced she's going to win. Even afterwards, she says that she won in the states that mattered, and, she says that she ended up, or she didn't end up going to Wisconsin at all. So I feel like this is kind of a good sign generally for Kamala Harris as a campaign, because she's just relentless in what she's doing. So she's even going into rural areas. And I think this is smart, making contacts with those voters who are, minority groups, etc. in those rural areas. You can turn them out via contacts. You don't have to convert people who are not already voting for you. You could just make contacts with people who are in favor of you and pull them out.